Thank you so much for coming today to this very special congressional research briefing on preventing gun violence. This is led by the Center for Evidence-Based Crime Policy and the Harry Frank Guggenheim Foundation. My name is Cynthia Lum. I'm a professor of criminology, law, and society at George Mason University and director of its Center for Evidence-Based Crime Policy. I'm so pleased to have you here all today at the U.S. Capitol, continuing our tradition of congressional briefings. Today is our 12th congressional briefing since our start in doing these back in 2008. And we are incredibly grateful to Senator Tim Kaine's office and his staff for helping us coordinate the use of this beautiful venue today in the Senate Dirksen office building. So thank you. For those of you who are not familiar with the Center for Evidence-Based Crime Policy, our mission since our inception in 2008 has been to make scientific research a key component in decisions about crime and justice policies. And the center carries out this mission by advancing rigorous studies in criminal justice and criminology through research practice collaborations. We also serve as a proactive informational and translational link to practitioners and the policy community. We believe in keeping the steady heartbeat of research and science going, and that's why we are here today. Our congressional briefings are one way that the center brings up-to-date research knowledge to the community here at the U.S. Capitol on important topics. And unfortunately, gun violence continues to be a significant challenge for many jurisdictions in the United States, which brings us together today. I'm now very honored to introduce to you Mr. Daniel Wilhelm, president of the Harry Frank Guggenheim Foundation, our partner for this briefing. We are deeply grateful to the foundation, to Mr. Wilhelm, to Joel Wallman, director of research at the foundation, who helped us make this briefing possible. Mr. Wilhelm, thank you so much for the foundation's support and partnership in today's events. We really appreciate that.
Thank you, Cynthia. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here this morning. My name is Dan Wilhelm, the president of the Harry Frank Guggenheim Foundation. We have a very particular focus at the foundation, which is that we focus exclusively on research related to violence, and the creation and the dissemination of knowledge, both to advance scholarly inquiry, but also to inform policy practice and enlighten public debate. This area of attention really was set from the beginning by our namesake, Harry Frank Guggenheim. Harry, in addition to being a diplomat, a businessman, and a philanthropist, was a naval aviator in both world wars. He was Herbert Hoover's ambassador to Cuba during a time of great political repression and violence, and so he really had seen violence firsthand. He was also, most people don't know this, probably the person most responsible for the creation of the modern aviation industry. He supported research in avionics, in meteorology, and a number of sciences and disciplines that allowed the modern aviation industry to take root. So he really understood both the importance of research, the importance of inquiry, and how damaging violence is in our society and in societies around the world. So when he died, he directed his foundation that bears his name to focus exclusively on this area of inquiry. So we're proud to carry on that tradition, working with many of the scholars in this room over time, as well as many others, and in important institutions like the Center at George Mason, to help not only create this a basis of academic inquiry, but to get that knowledge into the hands of people who can use it, such as those in the audience today. So we couldn't be more pleased about this long-standing relationship we have with the Center at George Mason and with Professor Lum, and we look forward to continuing that for years to come and look forward to a very robust and insightful conversation and presentations today. So thank you all for coming.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Wilhelm. I am now honored to turn the briefing over to Professor Christopher Koper of George Mason University. He is the Principal Fellow of the Center for Evidence-Based Crime Policy. Professor Koper is our resident firearms violence expert and will be introducing the speakers and also moderating the event. Thank you, Chris, for helping to bring this distinguished group of speakers together. Really appreciate that. And with not more ado, I will turn the briefing over to you.
Good morning. Welcome, and thanks to all of you for attending our event today. I'd also like to extend my thanks to the Guggenheim Foundation for their support of this event. Gun violence is a particularly serious and difficult crime problem for policymakers in the U.S. We have a long tradition of civilian gun ownership in the U.S. and constitutional protections for gun ownership rights. Tens of millions of Americans lawfully own and use hundreds of millions of guns for hunting, sporting, collecting, and self-defense. But the widespread availability of firearms in the U.S. also poses significant problems for public safety. Guns are used in hundreds of thousands of violent crimes and threats each year, contributing to higher levels of deaths and serious injuries, higher levels of public fear, and a wide range of societal costs. The challenge for us is to find policies, enforcement efforts, and prevention practices that minimize gun crime while working within constitutional limits and while navigating political differences over the appropriate scope of firearm restrictions. In today's briefing, our speakers will address several policy issues that are important to gun violence prevention efforts at all levels of government, but that are particularly salient to federal policymakers and practitioners. These include current federal policies and practices that the federal government has supported at the state and local levels through funding and other forms of assistance to state and local authorities, and emerging issues related to these efforts. And much of the research that you will hear about today has been supported by federal funding. We've also sought to focus on laws and practices that have broader public support, including among gun owners, non-gun owners, and people of different political parties. Specifically, our presentations will highlight efforts to prevent gun offending and victimization among high-risk individuals and groups, improve gun crime investigations, prevent illegal gun transfers and acquisitions, mobilize communities against gun violence, and provide better measurement and tracking of gun crime. Hence, I hope that today's briefing, which will emphasize research and analysis on these topics, will provide useful evidence on the importance of these issues and the efficacy of these approaches, and perhaps further illuminate promising areas of common ground in gun violence prevention for the new Congress and administration. We are very pleased to have 9 highly respected experts who have joined us for today's briefing. I will introduce them briefly before their presentations, but I invite you to read their full bios in your handout. We will hear from the first 5 speakers and then take a break of about 10 minutes for audience questions. We will then hear from the 4 other speakers before having a final question and answer session near the end of the event, and each speaker will have 9 to 10 minutes. So now I'd like to introduce our first speaker of the morning, Dr. Alex Piquero of the University of Miami, also the former director of the Federal Bureau of Justice Statistics, and he will be discussing gun violence trends and national measurement systems.